I wouldn't normally make a video like this, but this year something really special happened. For those of you who have never heard of this game before, this title screen might make you wonder what it could possibly have to offer. It's extremely simple, and the music playing in the background doesn't give you much to go off of. It feels almost empty. But, as you may have guessed by now, there is a reason for this. Omori is a game that prides itself on keeping things hidden. It's kind of like that iceberg meme. The further down you go, the more emotionally devastating and, frankly, horrifying it gets. It's hard to think of a game that's impacted me more than this. It's fantastic as a game, but it's more than that. We have never seen a game, or even a story, like Omori, and it's something that I think all interactive storytellers should try to aspire to. To fully explain why, I need to do some really deep analysis into this game's themes and story. It would take a full-length video essay to cover everything. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to divide this video into 3 sections. The first is a spoiler-free review on why I think Omori works so well just as a normal RPG. If you haven't played the game yet, hopefully it'll convince you to play it before heading into spoiler territory. In that section, I'm going to be diving deeper into its themes and ending and try to explain why I think they work so well. Finally, I'll give my reasoning as to why I think it's Game of the Year. Being a masterpiece doesn't necessarily make a game worthy of that title. So with that said, let's begin. Also, this game does contain disturbing themes as well as a few trigger warnings. Viewer discretion is advised. Video game stories aren't like other stories. Most stories need to have defined characters. I say most stories because there are exceptions. But video games are different. In fact, lots of great games with interesting stories have characters that aren't defined at all. Video games are interactive, so usually the world comes before the characters. After all, in an interactive setting, you're going to be interacting with the world more than the people in it. That makes Omori stand out. Not only are the characters incredibly well written, they're lovable beyond belief. We're talking Undertale levels of lovable. Whereas Undertale chose to go for more exaggerated characters, Omori's characters feel like actual people you could meet in the real world. The only real exception to this is the title character himself, Omori. While Omori serves a critical purpose in the story and is probably one of the most fascinating characters I've ever seen in fiction, everything that makes him so interesting is, unfortunately, a massive spoiler. I'll talk about it more in the spoiler section, so instead, let's talk about what he's like before that. Much like his appearance, he acts like a blank slate. He doesn't have any spoken dialogue, and he even seems a bit out of place among the rest of the cast. His black and white color palette immediately stands out among the pastels of the rest of the characters and world. Of course, this is fitting, since the starting area, white space, also feels incredibly out of place when compared to the rest of the game. It's only when you leave the weird emptiness of white space that you realize how massive this game really is, but it's also like that little bit of white space still lingers with you. With Omori being a blank slate, it's important for the rest of the characters to be, well, characters. Luckily, they go above and beyond at being characters. Aubrey is a character who you wouldn't expect to be the powerhouse when you first meet her, but when you start to understand her personality, the reason behind it becomes clear. She's probably the most actionable of the group. If something isn't right, she'll be the first to object, and she will be very forward. She has a spunky, happy-go-lucky attitude that can be a lot of fun. What makes her character most fun, though, is her frequent interactions with another character. Kel is the kind of character that was really easy to mess up. He's loud, obnoxious, and annoying. He even has a move where he runs around and annoys the entire party. But what's great about him is that those traits aren't what define his character. And that is when the true narrative identity of this god is revealed. Kel is a himbo. He's not just obnoxious, he's cheerful and genuinely has a lot of heart. He's also dumb as his pet rocks, and we love him for it. And as mentioned, he has a great dynamic with Aubrey. They have the dynamic of 2 third-grade friends who refuse to touch each other because cooties. If one was to go to the other's house, it would be to call them an idiot and trade Pokemon cards. They're good friends who just casually hate each other. And it's great, because as much as they do seem to genuinely annoy each other, neither of them show any animosity towards the other. They really do care about each other, and that dynamic just makes their bond stronger. By the way, he has an older brother. Hiro is literally perfect. He's supportive, responsible, and a real charmer. This man can do no wrong. The only thing he really lacks is physical strength, but who cares? He can make up for that. He'll cook you dinner. What more needs to be said? Okay, Hero is perfect, but this has gotta be my favorite character. If you liked Azrael, you'll probably like Basil. He's an adorable little marshmallow. He's a soft boy that likes gardening and photography. He's planted flowers that represent all his friends, and he has a photo album of all of the memories he made with them. So when he went missing, I was like, where's my baby? Oh yeah, that's the main goal of the game. Basil goes missing and you have to find him. It's simple, but you care because, again, look at this. Look at this innocent child. He could be lost, afraid, suffering from scurvy, you don't know? Does this look like the kind of child that would eat a lemon? And now we come to the heart of the party. Mari is Omori's older sister. She's super sweet, but has a bit of a mischievous side. She's the only member of the party that doesn't go along with the quest to find Basil, instead opting to support the team with picnics and save points. The fact that she's your save point makes her especially lovable. She creates an area of safety that you can always come to when you're hurt. She's great. Like I said before, the starting area of the game is white space. I love white space. The aesthetic is cool, it's nice and simple, and it's so boring! Yeah, aside from the mysterious black light bulb that hangs from seemingly nowhere, white space gets old pretty quick. Luckily, you soon find a knife that lets you get out of white space and explore the rest of the game. And man, is it huge! Every area is enormous and has so much character. This game has some of the weirdest locations I've ever seen. Like, you look on your map and you see things like a forest and an underground location and Is that the moon? Well, that's probably going to be the endgame location. Nope! That's the first place to look for Basil, obviously. Neil Armstrong was famously into botany, and the locations just keep getting better and better. A mysterious forest, a castle made for the most self-absorbed jerk in the world, and an underwater level that doesn't suck! I would tell you what my favorite location is, but it's toward the endgame, so I won't spoil it. What I will say is that it's by far one of the strangest places a game has ever put me, and I loved it. There are even 2 whole areas that are completely optional, with their own bosses and everything. No wonder this game took so long to make. Omori takes on a few different art styles with varying color palettes. Like most indie games of its budget, it uses pixel art for the overworld. Where Omori's art really shines, though, is in its battles. The battle sprites take on an almost crayon-like art style. It's the kind of thing that if your kid came home one day and said they drew it in class, you'd put it on the fridge for reasons other than just being a good parent. This is 100% fridge-worthy art. It's really unique, and while I wouldn't put it on the same level of uniqueness/beauty as something like Grease, I think it's still a noteworthy part of the game. Omori also has 3 color palettes it uses to achieve different effects. The first is a spoiler, so I won't talk about it here. The second is the Headspace color palette. Headspace is colored in beautiful pastels that radiate childlike energy. While it's really unique and charming, it's mostly there to throw you off when it drops the pastel colors and transitions into the horror. The horror/white space color palette mostly consists of blacks and whites, especially in white space and for Omori himself. However, some other elements of this art style can be found sprinkled all over the world. The pixels look messy, contrasting with the neater style found everywhere else. There are also horror elements that use actual photos, like hands and I think that might be clay? While there are some consistencies in this style, there's a lot of weirdness that happens with it, and nothing I say will fully encompass how creative and disturbing it can get. When I hear turn-based combat, I immediately get filled with an overwhelming sense of ugh! I'm not a fan. Undertale worked for me because it combined its turn-based elements with bullet hell minigames, which were really fun. Omori doesn't do that, but through some sort of turn-based wizardry, Omocat and her team managed to create a dynamic and, dare I say it, fun turn-based system. The key lies in its complexity. Despite running perfectly perpendicular to my own game design philosophies, the complexity of the battle system works to the game's advantage. The emotion system works almost like Pokemon types, with certain emotions being more powerful against others. Happy beats angry, angry beats sad, and sad beats happy. However, I find this system far more interesting. These aren't just Pokemon types, they have actual mechanics. Happy increases your crit rate but decreases your accuracy, angry increases your attack and decreases your defense, and sad increases your defense but decreases your attack. It also translates some of your damage into EP loss, what this game calls juice. There are also moves from both teammates and enemies that can inflict emotions or other effects on either. There's also the passing mechanic. When damage is being dealt, you can use energy, gained by being attacked, to pass attacks to your enemies, dealing extra damage. Depending on your team's collective level, it can also do things like heal party members or inflict emotion. This keeps you engaged even when you're not inputting attacks. If you save up enough juice, you can do a special team attack which, oh my god! It's the power of friendship! All of these things combined make for a dynamic and engaging turn-based battle system. Even if you're not a fan of purely turn-based combat, I'd recommend giving this a try. While the music in Omori doesn't quite reach the levels of Celeste or Undertale, it's still fantastic, with its fair share of true headbangers. The environmental music serves to accentuate the feel of the areas it represents, and it does so extremely well. From the intriguing Firefly Forest to the otherworldly lovesick 8,000 light years, to the extremely annoying but nonetheless catchy Wandering Rose, which won't just shut up! I'm just kidding, you're a great track. Omori offers some really fun and interesting environmental tracks. Again, I would share my favorite, but it's towards the endgame, so I won't spoil it. Where the music really shines, though, is in the battles. There are so many great boss themes, the three that immediately come to mind being You Were Wrong, Go Back, World's End Valentine, and of course, Ready Steady Go. What a bop. The Steam tags do not deceive you, this is indeed a psychological horror game. There are few jump scares, and the few there are often minimized. If you don't like jump scares, this game probably won't be too much for you. What Omori instead utilizes is a feeling of looming dread. All of the horror in Omori centers around this thing, called something. Its presence usually signals that something is very wrong and that some scary stuff is coming. And let me tell you, that scary stuff gets really weird. This is a game that takes a lot of inspiration from Yume Nikki, and it shows. And the truth of what something is possibly the most horrifying reveal I have ever experienced in anything. Period. This is one of the few stories where imagination isn't scarier than reality. Oh god. You know, my brain kinda doesn't like to think about it that often, but now that I have to write it out, I legit get chills. The truth of something is more disturbing than anything you could possibly imagine. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. You just have to play the game to find out. I'm not going to talk about the story here, which is a shame because I think it's the best part of the game. The way it's able to seamlessly weave gameplay and story is frankly revolutionary. Just trust me when I say that if nothing else I've said here interests you, play this game for the story. It's absolutely worth it. And that is why if you haven't played the game yet, I must bid you farewell for now. I advise you to not return to this video until you have. We're getting deep into spoiler territory here. I'm talking full analysis on themes, characters, and ending. Trust me when I say this game needs to be played as blind as possible. If you don't, you will miss out on a lot of what makes this game so special. I'll give you the next 10 seconds to hop off. Okay, is everyone who hasn't played the game gone? Good. Now, without further ado, let's talk about how Aubrey turned Kill into a convertible. No, I'm serious. If you haven't played this game, get out, or I will keep making references to other Omori analyses. Okay, I think they're gone now. So let's do this. The Lost Library hits different on a second playthrough. When you first encounter it, it's a mysterious, if somber area that gives you more insight into Sunny's life. When you play through it again, though, that somber feeling it gives is at the forefront. These aren't new events to you, so there's no mystery. They're memories. They're memories of a happier time, a time that, because of one mistake, Sunny will never be able to return to. While on the surface Omori's characters are fun and lovable, when you encounter them in the real world, it's clear that they're far more complex. The way each character deals with the loss of Mari is wildly different, but all equally understandable. So let's do this again. While at a glance Omori has less personality than this overused joke setup, it's clear from the outset that Sunny is different. While Omori is shown with only a black and white color palette, Sunny is shown in full color and far more dulled down than the vibrant pastels of Headspace. One of the brilliant things about Omori is that it tells us everything we need to know about Sunny without having him speak. It's all expressed through the gameplay of Headspace. One of the most common criticisms of Omori is that Headspace is simply not as interesting as the real world. But Headspace serves an essential purpose in making Omori as good as it is. Headspace is Sunny's characterization. Omori was originally conceptualized as a manga. However, it eventually became clear that the world Omocat had created was too detailed to be expressed in a linear medium without creating pacing issues. For authors like Tolkien, this wasn't really a problem. Not every part of a world needs to be expressed for a story to work. However, Omori was different. The different aspects of Headspace needed to be shown in order to truly convey the story she was trying to tell. That's why Omori is a video game. From those details that couldn't have possibly fit into a manga, we begin to understand who Sunny is and what he thinks of the people around him. He likes comics, he has a vibrant imagination, and he cares deeply for his friends, whom we become attached to before we even meet them for real. He idolizes Hiro, he has a crush on Aubrey, and he thinks Kel is... well, actually, Kel is pretty much the same. He finds the lady who works at the candy shop obnoxious, he sympathizes with the pressure being put on Daphne and Bowen, and as for Mari and Basil, that's going to require some deeper analysis. It's no secret that Basil is a trigger for Sunny, and this is reflected in Headspace. Basil is the one who finds the truth, he's the one that goes missing, he's the one that continues to die repeatedly in horrific ways, he's the one that Omori tries to make Sunny forget. Sunny doesn't want to hurt Basil, but seeing him starts to bring back the memory Omori has tried so hard to repress. As it's explained in the game, Mari never leaves her picnic basket. In his dream world, Sunny has Mari back, and he doesn't want to have to watch her die again. Nothing bad can happen to her if she just stays by her picnic basket, a place we know is safe because it's where we save. Just like Sunny, we're always relieved to see Mari, and we miss her when she's noticeably absent in the real world. Despite how interesting the real world is, it doesn't have Mari, and part of us wants to go back into denial just for her. You don't need to walk 2 steps into the Omori fandom to see just how many people empathize with Sunny's attempt to falsely believe she's still alive. All of this characterization, all of this empathy, all of it can be inferred by your adventures in Headspace. Don't worry, the other characters won't be this long. Out of everyone in the real world, Aubrey has changed the most. That spunky attitude has been turned into genuine anger and violence in the wake of Mari's death. All of her friends left to deal with the loss of Mari, and in her loneliness, she forgot that people handle grief in different ways. It's an easy assumption to make when you're in that kind of state, that if people aren't grieving in the same way you are, that just means they didn't care. She felt abandoned and betrayed, and it only got worse when she started taking it out on others. After she started antagonizing Kel and Basil, she gained a reputation. People started avoiding her, saying things about her, and that only added to her anger and loneliness. I mean, why wouldn't it? If the world is going to be cruel to you, why not be cruel back? It's a vicious cycle that is only broken when she's able to understand things from everyone else's point of view. It might seem easy to wrap your head around the fact that people experience grief differently and need time to process loss, but it's far different in practice. The loss of a loved one is devastating, and can lead to irrational thinking, never mind the fact that Aubrey was only 12 when it happened. But once she accepts the fact that her friends didn't abandon her, she can finally begin to heal. If Aubrey changed the most, Kel changed the least. He's still an energetic, optimistic goofball, if a bit more level-headed, who just wants to have a good time with his friends. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Many people have equated the characters in Omori to the stages of grief. Sunny is denial, Aubrey is anger, Basil is bargaining, Hiro is depression, and Kel is acceptance. But Kel isn't acceptance. It's clear he didn't take the time he needed to grieve when Mari died. All he wanted was for things to go back to the way they were. It's not an unreasonable thing to want, but forcing it upon yourself and others just isn't healthy. He doesn't think to support Sunny after spending 4 years in isolation, instead just wanting to hang out like they used to. He keeps telling Aubrey that he just wants to be friends like they used to without stopping to consider why she's acting the way she is. This may stem from the fact that his parents were far more supporting of Hiro during this time. On top of wanting his brother back, he may have felt like it was his job to be happy and support his friends above himself. It's only after he sees Aubrey break down in front of him over the loss of Mari, her frustrations at everyone leaving, and the photos being ruined that Kel understands what she and everyone else was going through. He's able to understand his mistakes and own up to the fact that he really wasn't a supportive friend. This depth is often missed on people who play the game, but it's the fact that this much complexity is given to a character who, at first, seems so simple that makes him so well written. While many may think he hasn't changed, that he's a perfect friend, that he's still the energetic goofball he's always been, the fact that he comes off as that and nothing else is his character flaw. Characters whose appeal turn out to be their biggest character flaw are so great. It's not done nearly enough, and when it's done well, it's easily top-notch character writing. Out of everyone, the way Hiro reacted to Mari's death was probably the most expected. Because of that, there isn't too much to analyze with what the game has presented to us. The game never explicitly states it, but Hiro and Mari were clearly dating. Their photos together show us that they were a loving and supporting couple, so Hiro understandably took Mari's death pretty hard. For a whole year, he wouldn't eat, he wouldn't talk, he could honestly be compared to Sunny. He felt responsible. He was her boyfriend. If she was suicidal, he should have seen the signs. He should have been there for her. Now it's too late. They had their whole lives to spend together, but now she's gone, and he's never getting her back. When Kel tried confronting Hiro about it, he lashed out and said a lot of really hurtful things. Kel started crying, and Hiro realized what he was doing to both himself and the people he loved. While he started to become more stable, he's clearly still distraught and guilt-ridden with Mari's death. He hasn't made many friends at school, and when he sits down at Mari's piano, he breaks down in tears. The latter, to me, shows the complexity of his character. The way he's reacting to the death of the person he loved isn't strictly healthy or unhealthy. He shuts himself in, he lashes out at others, and he doesn't make much of an effort to make connections. But he's also willing to feel his emotions and accept support. Yet another example of Hiro combating toxic masculinity. He never gets over his problems in the game, but it's clear he's on the right track. As he says himself, "Last time we made the mistake of leaving each other when we needed each other the most. This time, we'll stay together." The emotions chart at the beginning of the game foreshadows how each character reacted to Mari's death. Aubrey lashes out at the world, Kel tries to stay positive, Hiro spirals into depression, and Sunny retreats into a dream world where he never shows emotion. However, Basil is noticeably absent. That's because there's one emotion that this chart omits: fear. Basil has been so traumatized by what happened that he's almost non-functional. It's understandable to be upset when you learn a friend is moving away and you'll see them less often, but Basil runs into the bathroom and has a full-scale trauma-induced panic attack. He's a paranoid wreck of a teenager. He hallucinates, sees something everywhere, has a difficult time communicating with others, can't stand up for himself, and has developed few of the independence skills most teenagers his age have. Basil and Sunny's situations are comparable in a lot of ways. Both have been traumatized, but the way their trauma manifests is very different. Sunny's trauma has been repressed and exposes itself in subtler ways when triggered. Basil is constantly haunted by his actions. He remembers in visceral detail what happened on that day, and while Sunny is able to maintain some level of composure despite his mental stability being just as shattered, Basil's trauma is eating him alive. He believes that something is responsible for all of Sunny's actions because Sunny couldn't have done such horrible things, right? Even as an accident. Because of this, he feels an obligation to protect Sunny from any consequences he may face. Despite trying to cope by making an empty promise to himself over and over again, there's one line that perfectly encapsulates his fractured mental state. "Sunny, there's no way out of this, is there?" While he could be referring to their fight, I think he's talking about something. This one line presents us with everything he's experiencing. He truly believes that he and Sunny will have to live with this trauma, this guilt, these hallucinations, this indescribable suffering for the rest of their lives. For as much as he tells himself that everything is going to be okay, he doesn't believe it. It's become background noise for him at this point. I just want this kid to be okay. I'm not going to talk about his resolution now because it's important to some of the other topics I want to talk about in this video. For now, let's move on to... In the real world, Mari is dead. She's the only one you can't find in Faraway. You miss her warm smile at the picnic baskets scattered throughout the town. The most you see of her is her grave reading, "Our dearest Mari, the sun shined brighter when she was here." It might just be my own experiences talking, but the death of someone so young is always effective on me, even without all the work the game puts in to make you love Mari as much as Sunny did. She does appear for Sunny a few times. Despite the fact that they left things off on a heated argument that would lead to Sunny accidentally killing her, she still loves him. She helps him remember coping skills and asks him to forgive himself. She says that she'll always be watching over him, making sure he's okay. But that can't change the fact that she's gone. It was just a mistake. One horrible, horrible mistake. Omori represents the two major themes of the game, guilt and repression. While he is portrayed towards the end of the game as outwardly malicious, his only real purpose is to protect Sunny. He stores the truth in the black light bulb just out of reach to make sure that Sunny never learns what happened. If he ever found out, he would be forced to live with the knowledge that he was responsible for the death of his own sister. Wouldn't it be better to live in a world where she's alive and you can play with your friends forever? He only kills Basil in an attempt to remove one of Sunny's biggest triggers. And if you were to tell this to a player in the middle of the game, they may even be thankful for him. The game is acutely aware of what triggers Sunny, and whenever one of these triggers shows up, the player is put on edge. The game makes sure to condition you to be afraid of stairs, hair, stumps, and even Basil. When one of these shows up, you can expect an element of horror, and the player knows this. This makes them afraid of even simple actions like walking up the stairs, so Omori repressing these things makes sense. He doesn't want Sunny to find out the truth because unlike triggers, when you learn, you can't go back. Protecting the truth is priority over everything else. I'll talk about him more a bit later because he's also incredibly important to the ending. Another major theme of this game is the dissonance between headspace and reality. On the surface, it seems like it comes down to simple things like a change in color palette, but it goes far deeper. After the Otherworld segment, we get our first look at the real world. The color palette tips us off to the fact that we're no longer in headspace, but there are also weird hallucinations everywhere. By now, the player knows what's happening. Sunny's having a hard time telling the difference between headspace and reality. He's dissociating. I know what this game is doing. But then you see Basil, and you're confronted by Aubrey. Because you were first introduced to Kel, who, as far as you can tell, is mostly unchanged besides his attire and height, Aubrey comes off as confusing. This couldn't be Aubrey, could it? You know who Aubrey is. You fought Spaceboy together. You've seen her interact with the rest of the party. It puts you off balance even if you know exactly what's going on. It only gets weirder when you fight her because you're fighting your friend. The first fight in the real world is against your friend, someone you fought with just 5 minutes ago. But okay, I guess let's attack? And as if you hadn't already been thrown off balance enough, the game does this to you. This game just made you dissociate. The game taught you that attacking enemies with a knife was the way to defeat them. All you had to do was slash them enough times and your party leveled up. But this is the real world. People don't turn into toast, and knives are weapons that can hurt people. And this isn't cheap either. This isn't a moment that makes you go, well, how was I supposed to know that would happen? Because it's a knife. Of course it did that. This is an instance of the game blending story and gameplay. Sunny doesn't know better either. He's been using a knife harmlessly in Headspace for 4 years. This is just one instance of the game doing this kind of thing, and it's what I think makes the game so special. There are a lot of ways the game does this, like forcing you to organize the photos over and over again. This is the game making sure that you are very familiar with these characters and that you grow attached to them. And that ties into the theme of memories and protecting what you love that comes back at the end of the game. I'll point out a couple more instances of this as we go on, but if I were to talk about all of them, we'd be here for hours. So, I don't want to just recap the ending. I feel like when a lot of people put analysis in their titles, they really mean synopsis. A lot of times it's just saying what happened without adding anything. I'll try my best not to do that with the ending of Omori. I want to do it justice. Because in my opinion, the way this game ties together every theme and plot point is, without exaggeration, perfect. I'm going to try and explain how Omori went from being a great game to a masterpiece in just the last 30 minutes. Let's hope I don't screw this up. But before I get to the ending, there's one area I want to briefly talk about, as it is possibly one of the most terrifying places a game has ever put me. If you've played Yume Nikki, this area may seem familiar to you. The hub, if you will, is the opposite of white space. It has an inverted color palette, and stranger is everywhere. There are a number of doors that, when entered, take you to a nightmarish hellscape. This is where the Yume Nikki similarities start to kick in. I, however, am not familiar with Yume Nikki, so this area came as a bit of a shock to me. Each room is filled with bizarre, unorganized thoughts that could probably be deciphered if you didn't want to leave ASAP. Some rooms have glitching textures, some have weird, poorly drawn images, and some are downright sadistic. Each one has music that doesn't quite sound like music, and it's clear you have entered the deepest levels of Sunny's subconscious. It's weird, it's chaotic, it's incomprehensible, and that's why it works. While there's a fair bit that you can probably decipher, a lot of it is pure chaos. The human mind is more powerful than a supercomputer and more unexplored than the ocean. There are truly no limits to how strange and surreal the mind can get, and Black Space, by making no sense, captures that perfectly. There's one more thing I want to mention before we move on to the ending. I'm only going to touch on it briefly because there's already a video that explains it much better. I'll do my best to paraphrase here. Throughout the game, you're forced to stab yourself to leave white space. Doing this is uncomfortable, but you have no other choice. But as the game progresses, it becomes natural. That early feeling of discomfort is replaced by tedium. But when you enter a room and see your cat lying on an operating table and are asked to cut it open, that feeling returns. There seems to be no other way out, so I guess I have to do it. Whether or not you do is irrelevant. You just want out. Either you don't want to cut open your cat, or you really don't want to be in a room with a constant reminder of what you did. And when you find the option to stab yourself in the menu, you feel relieved. But it may take you a while before you realize that this game made you welcome suicide. Daryl from Psych of Play goes into more detail, so I'll link his channel down below. I recommend it. One thing that Omori excels at is restraint. Lots of games have lengthy cutscenes before the game even begins explaining who, what, when, where, and why the plot. But Omori doesn't do that. When you first start the game, you're given a brief cutscene of someone comforting someone else before being dropped directly into white space. You have no idea what the game is even about until you explore white space for about 5 minutes. And from there, the game gives you little trickles of information over the next 20-some hours it usually goes for. First you learn that it's a magical world, then you learn that there's something up with Mari, then there's another cutscene, then you learn that it's all a dream, then you learn that Headspace is a reflection of the real world, then you learn that Mari died, etc. The game keeps giving you these little drops of information that you don't quite know what to do with instead of telling you everything whenever it feels like it. It all alludes to a larger truth we're unaware of, but that we start to piece together in our heads on the last day as everything starts coming together. Character arcs come to a close, and we think we have a pretty solid grasp of what happened. On the day of the recital, Mari killed herself, causing Sunny to create Headspace in denial. But there are some things that just don't fit. What's the deal with stairs? Why is there so much violin imagery? How does something fit into all this? How does Basil fit into all this? What is the truth? The game makes us feel clever for putting together all of the puzzle pieces, but leaves us with just a couple pieces that don't add up. It does this so it can recontextualize every bit of information you've been fed up to this point, thus turning the entire game on its head. When we fall asleep at Basil's house, everything seems to be wrapping up. We have our friends back, we're going to talk to Basil, and everything is going to be okay. We go to sleep expecting one final trip into Headspace to say goodbye to it forever, but we wake up as Sunny, in white space. We walk around for a bit, only to find Omori. And when we interact with him, he says nothing. This is the character who we've been playing as a majority of the game, the one we started the game as. We've battled challenging bosses, had quirky interactions, lived as this character, yet here he is, standing right in front of us. It's hard to express just how off-putting it is to see your own player character standing right in front of you. It just doesn't feel right. Almost like your own identity as a person, the past actions that define you, are about to be put into question. It's time to face your final fear. After conquering your fear of heights, spiders, and drowning, Mari said there was one more thing that Sunny was afraid of. One that was more difficult to overcome. And here it is. Something. This abstract thing has been haunting Sunny throughout the game, and it's time to face it. Remembering the techniques Mari taught us, we refight our fears before returning to something. It's blurry, and it's hard to tell what it is. As the fight continues, however, it becomes clear. Something has become Mari. We learn to overcome, and something disappears for now. A white light bulb appears in its place, the opposite of the black light bulb. The repression of an idea now replaced with the remembrance of an idea. Sunny is suddenly transported to a field with several photos laying on the ground. Neither we nor Sunny know what these represent. We talk to Basil, and he says a number of things, but the line I want to focus on is, "The truth of that day will be hard to accept." This does two things. The first is clue us into the fact that we're about to learn the truth, the dark secret this game has been alluding to. The second is setting our expectations. We are told that this is going to be upsetting, but we're one step ahead. We know what happened. Mari killed herself. It can't get much darker than that, can it? Even when we start picking up more photos, things don't seem to get any clearer. We can sort of make out what each image is individually, but their relation to everything else is still a mystery. Daryl from Psych of Play spoke to someone who suffered from dissociative amnesia, and the way the memories started to return was shockingly similar. Again, Omori lets us share in the experiences of the main character. But then we're transported to a room filled with instruments, and we pick up one of the photos. It's Sunny and Mari at the top of the stairs, and a low piano note accompanies it. The same happens with the next photo, only Mari is blocking Sunny's path downstairs. Is that really what happened? No, Mari killed herself, right? Sunny wouldn't do that. This game wouldn't go that dark, would it? As we continue denying the truth, a circle of pointing fingers surrounds us, further implying that Mari's death was at the hands of Sunny. We're then put in a room with a lamp, and it asks us to screw in the light bulb to remember the truth. We interact with the photo, and then the game does this. If you're a fan of both horror and manga, you're likely familiar with the works of Junji Ito. Much like Omori, Ito takes full advantage of the medium he's working with. His detailed, scientific diagram-esque style emphasizes his body horror, but would be impossible to recreate in any form of animation. What stands out to me, however, is his use of the page turn. Because readers can choose when to turn the page, jump scares are simply not possible. Instead, Ito uses the concept of the page turn to build dread. The best example I can think of this is in the infamous The Enigma of Amagara Fault, in which long tunnels shaped like human silhouettes appear in the side of a mountain, and people are inexplicably compelled to enter them. It's implied throughout much of the manga that when you get deep enough into the tunnels, their shape begins to change, warping and distorting the shape of your own body into something horrifying. However, it isn't confirmed until the last few pages, where a group of explorers find the other end of the tunnels, distorted so much that they no longer look human. Before the last page, we see the explorers investigate them. By this point, we know that the last page is going to be them looking inside, and we know it's going to be horrifying. So, do we let curiosity take over and scar ourselves for life? Most of us do, but that doesn't stop our fingers from trembling as we turn that final page to reveal exactly what we were so afraid of seeing. I'm not going to show it here, but rest assured, it doesn't disappoint. The feeling I had reading that manga for the first time was exactly what I felt when this text showed up. It makes us pause and think. Despite how much we want to deny what the game is so obviously telling us, we're still going to pick up this photo of something we know is going to be painful. And when we do, it's dreadful. The silence is deafening. You would think that this is where the intensity peaks, but oh no. Omori takes those feelings of dread and rides them straight to the end. The situation only gets worse from here. All of the photos are in chronological order now, and it reveals that when Basil arrived at the house and saw what happened, in a state of panic he suggested that they frame her death as a suicide. We finally get to see the whole thing play out in order. It really went there. And with the reveal of what something really is, That couldn't be made more clear. When we wake up, horrifying music is playing in the background. It's fitting, considering what we just learned, but it also clues us into the fact that the dread isn't over yet. That's when we remember that Basil is still in his room. Everything about his behavior makes sense now. His constant anxiety, his nervousness around Sunny, his guilt, but it's clear now that you're the only one who can help him. When you step into Basil's room, he monologues most of what I just said. He refuses to believe that Sunny was the one who killed Omori, and he sees it as his responsibility to protect him. He says that there's no way out of this, that he'll save Sunny again, and you fight. Trying to get rid of something, Basil continuously attacks you. If there was a time to use your abilities, it's now. And they don't work. I speak from experience when I say that calming down doesn't come as easily as someone telling you to do it, especially when you're that stressed out. And after learning the truth and having these feelings well up inside both of them for the past 4 years, finally climaxing in this, it isn't hard to see why the techniques used to handle basic fears might not be as effective. The game is smart about that. With no options left and no escape, your only option is to fight back. Neither you, nor Sunny, nor Basil wants to be in this situation, but what choice do you have? There's no way out of this, is there? After Basil begs Sunny to stop, he uses his gardening shears to cut Sunny's right eye. You hear sirens indicating that Sunny and Basil are headed to the hospital. After the intensity that just occurred, we wake up in the middle of a crossroads. Warm light shines from above as calming music plays in the background. This is a stark contrast to what we just experienced and serves to tell us that the worst is over. We've learned the truth, confronted Basil, and now we have a moment of respite. We walk down the street and find our house where Basil meets us and delivers his final monologue. It's about his photo album. The photo album is something we've looked at again and again throughout the course of the game, and here, its true meaning is explained. The photo album contains memories, and those memories are the things we need to work to protect. But it's also proof that, no matter what, Sunny, Aubrey, Kel, Hiro, and Basil will always be there for each other, even if it has to be without Mari. It's proof that Sunny and Basil don't have to be afraid of losing their friends when Sunny tells them the truth. And having seen the photos over and over again, we don't need any more explanation than that. When we enter Sunny's house, we hear Mari playing the piano. She asks Sunny to forgive himself and says she'll be cheering him on. And with Basil and Mari behind him, he can finally take what's broken and begin to heal. Yes, that memory of Mari is painful, and it will stay with Sunny forever. But that's not all he should remember her by. He should remember her by her warm smile, how safe it felt to be with her, her compassion. We shouldn't let the fact that someone isn't with us anymore distract us from how much we love them. The violin begins to mend itself, a representation of Sunny's healing. We enter an auditorium with younger versions of Kel, Aubrey, and Hiro. They tell Sunny how much their friendship means to all of them. While it isn't actually them, I think a lot of what they say is true, like how Aubrey had trouble fitting in, and how Kel always felt inadequate. As shown by the photo album, their friendship means something, and is too important to them to be broken by something like this. And giving Aubrey that last line makes it so much more meaningful. Sunny makes his way on stage and begins to play. can't do it. This is so much for him to deal with, and he can't just forgive himself so easily. There's something stopping him. Omori isn't evil, not in his intent. His purpose is to make sure that Sunny doesn't have to live with the truth of what he's done, so he breaks. This is one of the best final bosses I've ever fought, because it so perfectly embodies the main struggle of the entire game, fantasy versus reality. This isn't Undertale, where you're saving all of your friends in a reality-breaking fight that perfectly ends a game about joy and connection. This is a game about grief. This is a game about guilt. The music doesn't make you feel determined to finish things once and for all. It's slow and somber. It gives you the feeling that you can't win, like your efforts to overcome this trauma are hopeless. And it feels weird fighting him. This is your avatar in Headspace. What happens when he's gone? This is why Headspace is so important. You and Sunny both love Headspace, and now you have to kill it. But you know you have to. Sunny can't keep living like this. But that goes against everything Omori has been working towards. Omori fights back with thoughts Sunny has likely heard repeating over and over in his head in an attempt to make Sunny give up. There's no way for Sunny to live without the knowledge of what happened, so the only thing Omori can think of is to convince him to end his own life. That would be better than having to live with the truth, right? Despite Sunny's new attacks, his friends cheering him on, there is no way to win this fight. What seemed like a small game mechanic that saved you a couple of times turns into the thing that keeps this fight going on for as long as it does. The fights we have with our thoughts are long, and sometimes they get the best of us. Sometimes all we can do is refuse to give up. For me, Final Duet will go down as one of the most beautiful and heartbreaking moments in any video game. I don't think anything could have fit this moment more perfectly. It shows us all of the good memories Sunny made with his friends, proof that they're not going anywhere. These aren't throwaway adventures in his mind, these are real memories he really made with his real friends. The ones he used to mend the violin he's playing right now. By showing us what happened at the lake, we really get a sense of how much Sunny and Mari loved each other and how much he misses her. The cold colors really make that last shot feel lonely. Final Duet offers us closure. This isn't some fake version of Mari he's using to cope, it's the real Mari playing alongside him. By finally being able to play the duet with his sister, a tune we've been hearing since the start of the game, he's able to accept what he's done, not run away from it, and forgive himself. Even if he can never truly move on, he can at least heal and live the rest of his life. And without the belief that neither he nor his friends can ever forgive him, Omori has no purpose. So, he disappears, leaving Sunny to take a bow for a performance 4 years in the making, and leave Headspace forever. Sunny wakes up in the hospital, and he cries. This is the most emotion we've seen out of him all game, and it makes sense. Even though he's forgiven himself, a lot just happened, and he's right to feel sad. He makes his way to Basil's room and says the first thing we've heard him say all game. And the game ends. This may leave some people wondering whether or not Sunny's friends forgive him. Many people have their own interpretations, but I can assure you that Sunny's friends absolutely forgive him. Many of the people who say this tend to look at the characters and their actions throughout the game, or even themes presented by them towards the end. While that certainly helps, we really don't need any of that. All we need is one line. They're our friends. You have to trust that they'll forgive us. Omori excels at putting you into Sunny's head. What Basil said is exactly what Sunny has to do when he tells his friends the truth, but he has no idea what they'll think when he does. He has to trust them. The fact that we don't get an answer is why they forgive him. The game is asking us to put our trust in Kel, Aubrey, and Hiro to forgive Sunny, and I trust them. So with all that being said, why do I think this is Game of the Year? A game can be good, great, or even a masterpiece, but Game of the Year implies that this game managed to overtake every single video game of that year in quality. Omori doesn't have the best gameplay of any game this year. It doesn't have the best graphics, or sound design, or even music. But Omori is special. Omori is my Game of the Year because it manages to do things I have never seen done before in video games or in storytelling. Video game storytelling is hard. It involves using the gameplay to elicit emotions in the player that mirror those in the game. Games like Undertale use the gameplay to elicit feelings of determination and connection. But Omori set itself a much higher bar. It had to create feelings of grief, guilt, even suicidal urges. Those kinds of topics are not only difficult to express through gameplay, but are also really easy to mess up. So many works of fiction try to tackle these topics, but in doing so, they oftentimes diminish the harsh realities those who experience them have to deal with, or worse, romanticize them. I've seen too many edgy fanfics that romanticize the idea of depression, trauma, self-harm, and suicide in an attempt to seem edgy. Heck, if I had seen Omori back in 2014 when Omocat was still posting about it on her blog, I would have probably thought it was one of them. And the people who are sensible enough to not do that are too afraid to touch these topics because they're afraid they could hurt someone. But Omori is different. Omori is darker than most works of fiction I've seen because most works of fiction don't want to go to those dark places. But unlike a lot of things you see online, it's not doing it for the sake of being dark and edgy, and it certainly isn't romanticizing anything. It treats these topics with the respect they deserve, and through gameplay, shows us what it's really like to deal with them. It's disturbing, it's messed up, and it's nothing to be envious of. But Omori also teaches us to not lose hope. It teaches us that it's okay to feel these bad feelings, to remember the dark moments in our life, to rely on others. I have never seen a story this simultaneously dark and respectful, this sad and uplifting, this terrifying and beautiful. It dares to go places others refuse to go, to use its medium like others have never done before, and it's all the more powerful because of it. It succeeds with flying colors. Omocat, if you're watching this, it's been about 7 months since I first played Omori. Despite how little time I've had with the game, it's already become one that has deeply defined me as a person. It was a deeply personal experience. Seeing Sunny struggle with and overcome his guilt over someone he cared about was something I really needed to see. Omori has helped me in ways I will never be able to put into words, and I hope I've done it justice by explaining why it was such a crime that it wasn't nominated for a single category at the Game Awards. So I guess all I have left to say is, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.